Halloween morning, keep that in mind. This is important for the story. Halloween morning, standing in the line at Starbucks, the gentleman in front of me turns, sees me, and then turns again to do that double take. I tell him, trust me, I wear this most every day. This is one of my favorite times of year. Even as a priest, this may be sacrilege. This may be my favorite time in the entire church year. This weekend, these days, where it grows darker so much sooner. Isn't that a wonderful time of year? The light begins to disappear, and so we have to rely on other kinds of light for us to make our way. It grows colder. The days are shorter. And so it's this time of year, the night before we remember all those who have died, the night before, most of you, particularly the younger ones of you, know it as Halloween. There was once upon a time, it was really known as All Hallows' Eve, the evening before we remembered all who died. To hallow something means to make it holy, separate, special, unique. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your name, O God, is different and special, set apart. And so there is a time of the year that we set apart to remember those that we love but see no longer. That is this weekend. Yesterday, technically All Saints' Day, but we are celebrating that today because it is a wonderful time of the year. One of my favorite writers is not really a theologian. He's not paid to be a theologian. He was never trained in seminary. Michael Ventura, he's one of those that grew up in the 60s and has never really left the 60s. He lives out in the desert in Arizona, and he's one of those that's a gadfly to everything in culture. He's worth reading. I like what Michael Ventura wrote. He said, it's this weekend, it's this time of the year that people feel elated. And when the ancients said that the worlds are closest, when the ancients said that the next world and this world grow ever so closely and the darkness descends ever more quickly, it is during that time, this weekend, we feel it so strongly. No wonder we dress up in all sorts of weird things and play like other people and play like the dead. No wonder we do that. In our funeral service, we use the words to declare that in the midst of life there is death, which I believe means the inverse is true. If we say that in the midst of life there is death, I believe that means that in the midst of death, there is life. And so we talk about that this weekend. And for a very immediate example of this, I received word early Wednesday morning that Jim Halligan, the husband of Cindy Halligan, died early Wednesday morning. So I talked to Cindy that Wednesday, talked to her about Jim's life, celebrating who Jim is, celebrating his life. And so in the midst of talking to Cindy about Jim's death, shortly thereafter, Father Sandy had a baptism class with Oliver and Avery to talk about new life. All within a space of a few hours, that reminder that in the midst of life there is death, and in the midst of death there is life. We Christian folks declare that. That is what the church declares, that there is no such thing as death, that we return to life with God. So who are these saints that we hear about this weekend? I've always been intrigued by that. I've always been intrigued because part of my suspicion is we try to figure out who the saints are because we are trying to figure out who's going to get into heaven, right? Or we want to figure out who's going to the other place. And so when we hear reference to the saints, we might be tempted to figure out who's getting in and who's getting out, who's getting in, who's getting left out. And so rather than speculate, which a lot of our Christian brothers and sisters do, you've seen those speculations, right? On television, the televangelists who have this enormous blackboard mapped out with the end of the world from the Revelation to John about who's getting in and who's not going to quite make it. You've all seen that, right? And they predict when the world is going to end. I've always found it very curious that rather than tending to speculation, I prefer to go to the source. That odd thing of going to the source. And this from the Revelation to John. There was an enormous multitude that no one could count. People from every tribe, every language, every nation, all gathered around the throne of God. A multitude that no one could count. And this enormous multitude, all saying salvation, life, health, wholeness, salvation belongs to God. Interesting when we try to determine who is saved and who's not saved. When we try to determine a particular country, nation, ethnicity, tribe, they're going to make it or they're not going to make it. Interesting that we do all this, and this is the revelation to John, a multitude that no one could number, all shouting to God, offering their praise, their thanksgiving, and saying, to you, God, to you alone, God, salvation belongs. It does not belong to Tim Heflin. Salvation is not the particular corner for St. Andrews. Salvation belongs to God and God alone. And so on this day, we are gathered to remember all of those that we love but see no longer. We are also here to celebrate those that we do see and we do love as we welcome Oliver and Avery into new life, the life of St. Andrews, the life of the church, and life with God. In just a moment, the parents and godparents will be asked a very specific question. And I remind people that this is really the essence of baptism. It comes down to this one question. Will you do all in your power? Not to be perfect, but will you do all you can to support these two as they grow into the stature of Christ? Will you do all you can to bring them up in the faith of the church? That is baptism, invited to new life. On this day, we remember all those that we love and see no longer. We get the chance to welcome and remember those that we do see and we do love. I will tell you that we are very well on our way with these two, particularly with Avery. Before the service, we were standing out in the narthex talking, and Avery declared that she wants to be a priest when she grows up. So I thought, well, we're quite well on our way here. We've answered that question. Will you do all you can? We've already arrived. I asked Avery what she liked about being a priest, what she thought she might like about being a priest, and she said, the church. I thought, well, that's a pretty good thing for a priest to want to like the church and be part of the church. Such an innocent thing to say, isn't it? Seemingly very innocent thing to say when asked what she likes. She says, I like the church. She likes the church. In the name of God, who calls us to life, in the name of God, to whom salvation only belongs, in the name of God, who keeps in his hand all of those that we love but see no longer. Amen.